thank you for joining me here today. My name is Jason Skinner, General Manager of TopAdmit, the leading online service for admissions essay editing and consulting. And I'm joined today here by Ms. Lisa Bartle, who is Managing Director of Trinity Scholar. And Lisa's invited us here today to talk a little bit about what parents and students should know about the SAT and ACT exams. All right, well, Lisa, you've invited us to your offices here. I know you have some classrooms in the back. Let's go ahead and decamp to your classroom, and we can talk a little bit more about this subject and some important things that parents and students need to know.
That sounds great. Let's head on back.
Okay. Lisa, thank you again so much for joining us here today. Here we are in Trinity Scholar's classroom, and this is the most opportune place to ask a few questions of our subject today, which is an overview of the SAT and ACT exams. So thank you again. Now, first off, could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and about Trinity Scholar?
Sure. My name is Lisa. I'm originally from Michigan and did my undergraduate study at the University of Michigan. Moved to the East Coast to University of Maryland to attend law school there in Baltimore. And I've been here in Taiwan for the last 20 years.
Wow.
So working in education, college preparation the whole time.
I see. Well, I've been here a while myself, so I can definitely appreciate that. Well, for what we're talking about today, could you help us get a brief overview of the SAT and ACT exams?
Would love to. Both the SAT and the ACT are college preparation tests that students take in order to apply to universities in the U.S. Typically junior or senior year. 2.1 million ACT test takers annually, about 1.7 million SAT test takers. So either exam will put you in good stead for applying to universities.
Okay. Well, Lisa, so it sounds as if the ACT has become more popular in recent years than the SAT. Is that correct?
Since 2010, yes. 2010 was the first year that ACT test takers exceeded SAT.
Well, should a student consider any factors in deciding whether to take the SAT or the ACT exam?
So both exams are accepted universally. And this is a question that not only we ask, but organizations like the National Association for College Admissions Counseling. You have the director of Harvard Admissions who says it makes no difference to us whether a student submits an SAT or ACT. So find a test that you feel most confident in, that you do best in. Universities have no preference one over the other.
I see. And so taking that initial assessment exam for both tests is probably pretty important in making that determination.
Exactly, so that you can make better use of your time in prepping for only one of the exams.
Saving time. Well, now I understand that some changes have been made to the SAT exam lately, relatively recently. What has changed in the redesigned SAT, and how does it compare now with the ACT?
So the SAT changed predominantly to become much more like the ACT because the number of test takers for the ACT annually had they were making ground basically in terms of how many students were taking the test each year. SAT did some revisions so that they could become more competitive with the ACT. So you find many similarities between the two.
I see.
The big ones are on the new SAT, there's no longer a guessing penalty. So that's fantastic for test takers, that your score is made up only of positive points. There's no subtraction any longer for incorrect answers. There also is, in the math sections of the SAT, a big change is out of the two sections. One section the students can use a calculator on, the other section there's no calculator. So the SAT prioritizes mental math a bit more now.
I see. Well, I can see that it makes a tremendous difference on test taking strategies, doesn't it?
It does, it does.
Well, specifically for the SAT, are there other things we should know about its format and scoring?
So the scoring is now out of 1,600 points. There are 4 sections of the test: evidence-based reading, writing, and then the 2 math sections. The 200 to 800 points that you would get for verbal and for math are what make up those 1,600. The optional essay, which we should make the point that the essay is optional as to whether colleges require that essay score be submitted. So if you're an SAT test taker, you probably want to take the essay. That's going to be scored separately as well. For the ACT is scored out of 36 points, and again with a separately scored essay.
I see. So that's the overview of both the SAT and the ACT that are scoring. I see. Well, now for the 2 tests, when should, as a test taker, when should I be planning to actually take the test?
Best time to take the exam is going to be anytime beginning summer between sophomore and junior year, so 10th and 11th grade, during your junior year, and if you really, really need to, possibly the fall of your senior year. But you want to be looking at the summer between 10th and 11th grade and during 11th grade as best time to take the test. SAT is given 4 times a year internationally, ACT 5 times a year. So if you can get it done during 11th grade, you'll be all set to spend fall of senior year just working on your college applications.
I see. Well, it's a much more efficient use of time, I can see that. And time is short. So how should a student begin preparing?
First thing is...
And when should you begin preparing?
Okay. For either exam, preparation is going to be similar for both. You want to begin with the practice test. See where your strengths and weaknesses are. Capitalize on your strengths. So those practice exams, both College Board and ACT organization make these exams available to students. So you can come to a place like Trinity Scholar, but if you just want to find out how you're doing, you can jump online to any of these websites and find a practice test, see where your scores are. Then a lot of the preparation as a student is going to be, you've been working on the content in high school, so your focus in prepping for that real test date is going to be working on your pacing. So as we mentioned earlier, there's no longer a penalty for incorrect answers. You want to make sure you've got an answer in there for everything. Multiple choice, the SAT, and the ACT, I believe. It's just 4 options for the questions. So get an answer in there, whether it's because you know it or you're guessing. It's just going to be an accumulation of positive points.
I see. That's a little bit different from when I took the SAT.
It is. I should mention as well, in the math sections on the SAT, there are grid-in questions. And grid-in questions, basically, it's a fill in the blank. So there are a few questions on the SAT where you need to solve the math problem yourself.
I see. Well, that leads me to my next question is, how much math should a student have to be prepared for either test?
So what you've been working on in high school is probably slightly more complex math than what you'll see on the SAT or the ACT. Both tests are very algebra heavy. So know your math properties, fundamentals, algebra. ACT has a bit more geometry on it than the SAT does. Trig, pre-calc, they largely go unnoticed on either test. Algebra is where it's at.
I see. Well, I've always heard the myth, or had the impression that some students are great at geometry and weak in algebra. Others are weak in geometry and great in algebra. I was one of the geometry kids. So are there any particular study strategies for those kids who find themselves strong in one area and weak in the other?
Well, for that, I would say if you're strong in geometry, go for the ACT, because about a quarter of the math problems on the ACT are going to be geometry, where you've got only 6% of the math questions on the SAT being geometry based.
I see.
But also for a test taking strategy, the multiple choice part really comes in, where if it's not your strong suit, if you can eliminate any answer choices because either they're too big, too small, not what the question's asking, and reduce the number of possible remaining options, that's going to work well for you in the areas you're not quite as strong in.
Awesome. That's a great tip as well. Well, are there any, between the time you begin preparing and the time you actually take the exam, are there important milestones that a student should be shooting for?
So again, you want to know where you're starting from.
Yeah.
You also want to know what your goals are. So it's easy to say, I want a 1600, I want a 36. But if you take a look at the schools you think you might be interested in, what their standardized test score ranges are, that'll give you more information as to what your target should be. So for example, to score in the top 1% on the ACT, a 33 gets you to the 99th percentile, just like a 36 does. So for the SAT, that would be about a 15, 10, 15, 20 would put you in the top 1%.
I see.
Let's talk a bit more realistically. If your score is somewhere more in the middle, you want to be thinking top 50% as opposed to bottom 50%. So what's your target going to be to get to that 20 in ACT, or to get to about a 1080 in the SAT? So you want to be looking at those markers that make you competitive for the colleges you want to apply to.
I see. Well, is that information available for the college or target schools? What kind of expectations that they have?
Absolutely. So colleges in their admissions sections, they often will give you a range that not only will state the average score of the SAT or ACT of the admitted applicants, but they'll give you the 25th percentile all the way up to the 75th.
I see. Well, now say that I'm a student and I've taken either the SAT or ACT one time and I wasn't quite happy with the score. Do I have another chance? Is there any option to take either test more than once?
Yes, so for both tests, you can take them more than once. We were talking about your junior year of high school being the optimal time to do it. So for ACT, you're looking at April and June. For SAT, you're looking at March and May.
I see.
And the average number of times that college applicants take these tests is a little bit more than 2. So 2 to 3 times puts you right in there with everybody else.
I see. I see. So, since a student does have the option of taking the SAT or ACT more than one time, would you have any guidance on when they should take that option? Is it always a good idea, or should they consider whether to go for that?
So, it's a matter of, can you change your ranking compared to other college applicants? So if you have a 33 on the ACT, you're in that 99th percentile, and you think, you know, I'm so close, I can get a better score. Even if you do get a better score, you haven't moved up the rankings at all. So once you're in that situation, there is no reason to do it again. But if you can change your score, so on the SAT, let's say you're in the 75th percentile, you're getting about a 1220, and you think you can get yourself into that top 10%, 90th percentile, which is a 1340. Go and study for that extra 120 points. You'll go from the top 25% to the top 10%, and that does make you more competitive.
I see. So you're not only looking at the raw score, you're also looking at the percentile and the school's expectation and whether you actually move the needle in that respect.
Yeah, so for international applicants to U.S. universities, one thing to keep in mind is your SAT or your ACT test score. It's ranked 5th out of what the schools are looking at. And so if, in terms of your grades, your curriculum, your overall GPA, your TOEFL, IELTS scores, if you've got all those other things taken care of and you think that that extra nudge that your application needs, the 5th factor for international students is SAT or ACT. So it absolutely does make an impact.
I see. Well, if the student does take either test, SAT or ACT, more than once, do they have any options on which scores are sent to the school?
Almost all universities and colleges in the U.S. allow for score choice for SAT or even for ACT now. So again, if you know the schools you're looking at, check and see if they allow for score choice. Most do, so you can pick and choose. There are some that don't. Cornell does not. Yale does not. You must submit all of your scores to those schools. And then some schools even allow you to super score, which means you can take individual section scores from different tests and combine them together for that super.
Well, that's important to know whether a school offers that as well. I see. Well, now in terms of logistically, are there any considerations on how and where I register for the exam?
If your school is a registered test center for SAT and ACT probably, then it's probably all going to mostly be taken care of for you. It's done through your school. If your school is not a test center, then for both organizations, you need to get on the website, register online. It's the only available registration option now, unless you're testing at your own school.
I see. Well, one question I think is important to discuss is when should a student consider going to an educational consultant to prepare for either the SAT or ACT?
For test prep these days, students have a lot of options. So you can study on your own, you can study with a tutor. If you like being in a group situation, coming to a place like Trinity Scholar, you've got a teacher who not only is an expert in the test, himself, but they've gone through training from a test prep company where we are fortunate to be partnering with Kaplan. So we are able to have that research and development that Kaplan sees from centers all over the globe at this point. And you can know that when you come to a place like Trinity Scholar, that not only is the teacher an expert in the exam, but they've got the cutting edge teaching techniques that really make that difference in how you can improve your score. Because it is content, but there's strategy there as well.
I see. Well, as we've learned in this discussion, strategy is not only the knowledge you have, but also the strategies you take in approaching the test, which are critical.
That's right.
I see. Well, Lisa, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to convey to students or to parents on preparing for the SAT or ACT exams now?
The best advice I can give to parents and students is to find out about the tests early on, so that you know where you are in terms of your current abilities as opposed to what your targets are. College admissions websites have lots of information. There's lots of material out there from organizations such as ourselves, but also College Board and ACT organization, so that you can have access to the information and the study tools that you need, so that it doesn't need to be a rush job, and there's no reason for this to add extra stress to your already busy, complicated high school life.
I definitely appreciate that. Well, Lisa, thank you so much. And
Thank you.
I'm really glad to be speaking with you today.
It's a pleasure to have you here with us.